Hello everyone, my name is Nayla Pierre, and today I will be giving you a mini tutorial on orphan drugs. Let's begin. What is an orphan drug, you may ask? Well, an orphan drug is a pharmaceutical that remains commercially undeveloped because of limited potential for profitability. Orphan drugs were otherwise neglected until 1983. The Orphan Drug Act ODA of 1983 is a law passed in the interest of encouraging sponsors to develop and bring to market drugs intended to treat rare diseases and conditions. The Orphan Drug Act emerged in response to the small percentage of orphan drug approval in the U.S. years prior to the Act's approval. For example, between 1967 and 1983, an estimated 58 new drugs were approved in the U.S. that could have qualified for orphan status. Many other drugs that could have qualified for orphan status in that time period before the ODA Act remained undeveloped or untested due to a limitation in commercial gain. Originally, after the Act's passing, orphan drug status solely applied to products that had an estimated profit from sales to be of a lesser amount compared to product development incurred costs. Due to the difficulty in assessing the first criterion, originally established in the 1983 ODA, the Orphan Drug Act Amendment of 1984 extended the definition to allow for products treating any disease or condition with an inclusion of a population size requirement of fewer than 200,000 persons in the U.S. The ODA provides incentives for sponsors who receive orphan drug designation. Three primary incentives are provided to sponsors through ODA. The first primary incentive is federal funding of grants and contracts to perform clinical trials of orphan products. Secondly, sponsors receive a tax credit of 50% of clinical testing cost. Lastly, sponsors receive an exclusive right to market the orphan drug for 7 years from the date of marketing approval. This market exclusivity incentive is very beneficial to the sponsors. It protects them essentially from competition for 7 years. Nevertheless, this can be burdensome to consumers due to the commonly increase in pricing in this time period. Additionally, noteworthy benefits available to sponsors of orphan designated drugs include priority FDA review or fast track designation, and an exemption from prescription drug user fees. So, what is the importance, you may ask? You may find yourself pondering what is the relative significance of orphan drugs. According to the Food and Drug Administration, 7,000 rare diseases are known to affect roughly 30 million Americans. However, only 5% of orphan diseases have an FDA-approved treatment. This is a relatively low number compared to the number of persons in need of approved treatments. There is a high need and demand for more pharmaceuticals that treat these rare diseases or conditions. The importance of orphan drug lies in the need. Shorter development times increase the availability of these drugs to the public. To qualify for orphan drug designation, a drug and the disease or condition must meet the criteria as previously discussed. Regulatory functions are performed by the FDA Office of Orphan Products Development, also known as OOPD. The regulatory role of the FDA is reviewing and approving requests for orphan product designation, overseeing the 7-year exclusive marketing for orphan products, coordinating research study design assistance for sponsors of orphan drugs, and encouraging sponsors to conduct open protocols. Additionally, the FDA awards grants for the development of orphan drugs. A sponsor seeking orphan designation for a drug must submit a request for designation to OOPD. Additionally, each designation request must stand on its own merit. For instance, sponsors must submit their own data and information in support with their designation request. The application must include information required to deem eligibility. Once orphan designation request is granted, the standard regulatory requirements and process for obtaining marketing approval should be adhered. Safety and effectiveness must be established through adequate and well-controlled studies. However, most orphan drugs reach market through an accelerated approval process. Keep note, everyone, that submitting an orphan designation request is unrelated to the drug approval process. Additionally, I would like to add that the orphan drug designation application can be filed anytime in the drug development process, which can be before the new drug application submission or even all the way in the beginning, prior to the investigational new drug filing. Okay, moving on to some case studies. So, I want to highlight two drugs, Rituxan and Gleevec. Rituxan was given orphan status to treat a rare type of lymphoma and is now considered the second most profitable drug in the world. It later extended its usage for a widespread of non-orphan indications for other types of cancer and rheumatoid arthritis. Gleevec is another good example of a profitable orphan drug. This is due to Gleevec having multiple orphan disease indications, and was also had many non-orphan indications. The take home from these two cases is that both drugs highlighted were profitable for the sponsors. Nevertheless, both drugs also served a greater purpose, which was a benefit to the public. Both drugs treated a rare type of a disease or condition, which created a portal for treatment options to patients that did not have none before. Additionally, later indications extended the drug on-label usage, which increased the population size benefiting from these drugs. Okay, guys, let's talk about the major advantages. For the sponsors, advantages include incentives like originally discussed, which would give sponsors an increased market share, lower marketing costs, give them the ability to have a higher pricing, longer exclusivity period, and faster returns of their money. In addition, a number of orphan drugs are biologics, which make them less likely to have generic equivalents, which extends the value of the drug even after patent protection ends. Due to the small resource requirement, allows a smaller company to make numerous different orphan drugs, which would not be feasibly possible for non-orphan approaches for that said smaller company. The advantages for a consumer is that the new treatment options are available. More orphan drugs are now being developed due to the profitability from incentives, which benefits both sponsors and consumers. How, you may ask? Well, the intended consumers are getting the treatment options, and sponsors are making a profit out of the incentive system created by the FDA and the ODA Act. Let's talk the major disadvantages. Okay, so a disadvantage for consumers is the higher pricing cost of orphan drugs due to the lengthened time of exclusivity. Orphan drug development is also a risky venture for sponsors due to the small number of patients. Also, like bringing any drug to market, there is a risk that the drug might not get approval from the FDA after clinical testing is done. Revenue may also plummet after patent protection expires due to generics becoming readily available. Due to the small patient population, it may also be harder to conduct clinical studies. Let's keep all these in mind when you're thinking of disadvantages. Okay, guys. So in conclusion, although orphan drugs treat only a small number of patients, they can receive a weighty revenue and have a significant value to the healthcare system in the treatment of rare diseases. Many large pharmaceutical companies are expanding their orphan drug development. This will increase the availability of orphan drugs tremendously in the years to come. With new orphan diseases being discovered every week, the potential for pharmaceutical drug development in this area is booming. It's huge. When Congress passed the Orphan Drug Act in 1983, the goal was to facilitate development of orphan drugs, in which it did. However, within the legislation was a provision to establish an orphan product board. The board's purpose was to coordinate action between government regulatory bodies, pharmaceutical companies, and advocacy groups. Unfortunately, the Orphan Products Board hasn't been active for over a decade. Due to this, rare disease advocacy groups have long urged for the reinstatement of the Orphan Products Board. I speculate the Orphan Product Board will be reinstated in the near future. With or without this reinstatement, I definitely see a bright future for orphan drugs in America. Well, these are my references, guys. Hope you guys have a nice day and a good night.